Well, thanks everyone for joining us on what not all people would consider the most stimulating of topics, which is policies and procedures. Thanks to you for coming. I know during a really busy time. I hope that we can be productive and it's a good use of our time. And I want to thank Adrian.
Oh, it looks like the power went out.
Yeah, timing is unbelievable, right?
Oh, I wondered whether that was her or us. Okay, let me call her.
Be easy to just
Oh,
woeful. I'm sorry.
you froze for a few minutes. We missed it.
Oh no. Okay.
So sorry.
Okay, well, I was just thanking everybody and thanking Adriana, but then I'll move if I need to say that in my time that I've been at Pitt, which is since about 2000 in a teaching role, I was just sort of gleefully unaware of most policies because everything that I did was in my class with my students, and I followed guidelines and then had the policies that I upheld in class with students. And you're sort of in this nice little closed world where you kind of are in control and in partnership with your students. But then I became an undergraduate advisor for my department. And in that role, I really began to appreciate the role of these policies in students' broader experiences. And then when I became undergraduate director, oh my gosh, I thought, well, we became policy nerds, understanding how things worked on students' transcripts. And then in my role as assistant dean, I will say that I feel that it's a policy world and we're all just living in it. So I've had a total transformation of my appreciation for these. So it seems that policies work to both protect students and be sure that they have equitable and fair treatment in their experiences here, but they also protect the integrity of the system that we are all part of. So that is the two sides of that. So before we get started, since we're a nice small group, I just wanted to ask you if there are any, I have something prepared, but I can easily divert if there's something that you all like. What brought you here? What are you interested in talking about the most? So anyone can just pop in.
So this is my first semester at Pitt. So I guess just
Okay,
talk about what a G grade is and like under what
great.
conditions can it be awarded.
Excellent. Okay, great.
I'll
Anybody else? Yes.
I'll echo that when is the time and what are the conditions when faculty should be nudging, you should really withdraw, and what are the moments where it's no, a G makes sense, let's work with you on a G. I think
Right.
that's like a line that I'd love
Okay.
clarity on.
So, all right. So if it's okay, then let's get started. I did put together some other things that I think are, I'm going to share my screen, that are policies that seem to constantly come into our lives in the dean's office that we see a lot of clarity might help with. So let me start with just some of that, particularly for you, Alina, who's new to the university and new to Pitt. And stop me if there's anything that you need more clarity on here. But these are some things that I think impact us all in big and small ways that are not as clearly understood. So one is this, is that we don't have a numerical grade equivalent at Pitt writ large. We have a standard grading scale, but which looks like this on points, but where the A plus is begins and ends, and where the A begins and ends and the A minus begins and ends seems to be at the discretion of the department or the instructor, depending upon where you are. We get a lot of questions about this, like is an 83 an A or a B or a B minus? And so we don't have a university policy on that. So that's one thing to clear up right away. The second is waitlists, and I would imagine this impacts you in your department a lot, Alina. This we'll send these slides, but this waitlist is a live link to the waitlist policy. But this is something that's becoming firmer and firmer, and something that really matters to us as instructors because students come to us to get into our classes off of waitlists. So that seems to be what they tend to do the most is make an appeal to us and a reason for why they need to get in off a wait list. And that we have, very little control over, but here's the policy so you can understand. So the waitlist functions that students are auto-enrolled as spots open. Can I just ask, can everybody still hear me? Am I still? Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, all is good.
Oh, okay, good. All right, just checking because I've lost your pictures. Okay. The waitlist will skip over students who cannot be enrolled due to obstacles, as if the number one person on the waitlist will then entering that class will take them over 18 credits. They are prevented from doing so because they need to appeal that, or if there's a class conflict. But students, just so you know, are able to set up their enrollment to swap courses or drop a course if it's preventing enrollment. So that is a problem, but they have control over it. They just have to toggle that on their own. Enrollment, however, for waitlist, particularly for highly sought after classes, is updated hourly. So if a spot opens due to a student drop, that class will remain closed until the hourly update is completed. So if a student drops a class at 10 after 11, there's not an available spot until 12. It holds the whole roster until then they go to number 1, number 2, number 3, or whatever they need to do. Faculty may wish to allow students in from waitlists. They used to do it a lot more than I think we do it now, but the procedures are determined by the registrar's guidelines as well as departmental policies. And something that's really come up now is the issue of room capacity. So if the room will not allow another student, the registrar, even if you want to let them in and they're number 1 on the wait list and we get a permission number, the registrar will stop that. The other thing is that permission numbers need to be issued by departments. So an email from a faculty member granting permission for a student to add a course will not suffice for a late add, which is an appeal carried out through the dean's office. So the wait lists are pretty straightforward, but there are these little moments in them. And what students often do is go like straight to the source and ask if they can get into a course, based on a need like graduation or something. So they seem like objective policies, but there's a lot of subjectivity that enters it as well. I like to call this next part policies and procedures I wish I understood earlier in my life. And these are the main 4 that I think impact us as faculty. One is that students can add courses during the first 2 weeks of the semesters, but they can drop courses during the first 3 weeks of the semester. So that extended drop period allows them to drop but not add. And requires that they remain full-time students if they drop. So the fact that those have 2 different deadlines kind of changes things. The second is that monitored withdrawal is a form submitted by a student, typically by the end of week 9, but they do not need an instructor's signature or permission. They can do that themselves, and they do that on their own, which means if you're not looking at your roster, you might think in week 10, 11, 12, a student's gone missing, but actually that student has withdrawn, and that will appear on your roster, so you know that, but nothing sort of signals it to you. The other thing is if a student chooses to take a course, credit, no credit, satisfactory, no credit, they actually need a C to do that, which is higher than the benchmark needed for a lot of other things. So if a student gets a C-, they will not get credit for that course. And finally, an R means that they've resigned from all their classes. So if you see that, it means that they've left the university during that semester. 2 other things that are more like enrollment management-y stuff, which is that international students who plan to withdraw or resign from courses must work with the Office of International Students due to visa issues. So we urge you not to just sort of make a recommendation without sending them to that office first, who understands the complexity of their presence in the United States. And this one is something that some of my colleagues will remember we had a lot of confusion about. But it turns out that if a student asks to be added to your Canvas page because they are trying to get into your course in the beginning of the semester, be that they are on a wait list, they have a hold of some sort, they're an international student, and their arrival is delayed, something like that, but they are not officially enrolled in that course by the add deadline, you should go in and be sure that they are removed from the Canvas page, because being in the class and submitting work without official enrollment is not permitted. And leads to problems down the line. It seems that there's some sort of issue with Canvas that it runs according to the enrollments, but not if you add a student yourself. So that as well. Now this policy, grade repeat policy, this one's really murky in a lot of ways, but students are basically given 3 opportunities to successfully complete a class. But if they take the class and withdraw, if they take the class and drop, if they start the class and get a G grade that turns to an NG, that is not considered an attempt. So you can see a student's transcript that can literally have like 7 times that class appears, but only 3 are considered attempts. And I'll just not read all of this to you, but if a student does want to take a course for a 4th try, that is an attempt, that is an appeal that goes through the department and the dean's office as well. I just dealt with the last point this morning that if a student gets a grade and then repeats that grade, the latest grade repeats the previous grade, replaces it in their GPA, which means if a student gets a C-, takes that course again, gets a D, the D replaces the C-, so their GPA actually goes down. And this comes back to bite many students as well. It's kind of it's complicated. And then we have this one, the G grade policy. So let me just get you all back here for 1 second. All right, there we go. So the G grade policy, and here we have G grade policies all over the place. This is what the registrar's policy is, which is the G grade signifies unfinished coursework that is ongoing. Students assigned a G are required to complete course requirements no later than 1 year after the term or session in which the course was taken. Some schools have a shorter deadline. See school details. The NG, which will happen as soon as the G grade reaches its period in which they're allowed to complete that grade. So literally 1 year to the date of the end of the time from they received the G grade. It will lapse, it'll go to an NG, and it will not count for anything, nor will it, nor is it a grade that can be changed. So this is something else that we get appeals with in the dean's office, and something that the registrar is loath to turn around on that one as well. Some other, a withdrawal will leave the course on their yes, exactly. Right. So as long as they drop, thanks for handling the chat, Freda, as long as they drop in the first 2 weeks, it will not be on their record. Or if they appeal to drop, and win that appeal. I wanted you to know, as arts and sciences faculty, that other schools do have firm policies about this that give the faculty much more detailed discretion. This is the School of Engineering's policy. This is sent to faculty, and there is a G grade form that actually details here that a G grade should not be issued unless the student has completed most of the class. If a student has more than 25% of the course to make it, it is unlikely that they will do so independently. So they give you a number. A G grade agreement, which is something that we can encourage faculty to do. I've started doing it, and I've encouraged our faculty to do it as well, can have specific expectations and deadlines for the completion of coursework. So a suggestion is provide the student with the grade they have earned thus far in the course. So in other words, right now, if the student has a C and does no more work and would end up with a C, the student should be told that is what the grade is that you have at this point. We've had cases, and the grade that would be entered for you, because we've had cases of students who get the G grade, it lapses to an NG, they lose the credit, and then they are 3 credits short of graduation. So they need to understand those risks as well. And then and then this takes more faculty management, but you can say, if this work is not completed, that grade that I've informed you you have at this point will be entered by this date. If you don't do anything, that grade will lapse to an NG. So most other schools, I'm sorry, let me just get rid of this one more time. Hang on. Zoom. I'm so glad we're back in person. Hang on. Sorry. Okay. Most other course arrangements, dropping, a monitored withdrawal past the deadline, and an R are completed by the student alone or through the dean's office, but the G is arranged exclusively between student and instructor. So understand that it has sort of a unique placement here. This is a contract that CGS, part of our school, sends to students who get G grades that is registered with the school, and therefore the student signs this contract and is held to the agreements. So just so you know, these things are floating around. Sky also has a really firm policy and firm set of standards. A couple other considerations before we get into the discussion and workshop how to do this is that a G grade, really, the expectation of giving a G grade is that the instructor will continue to work with the student, provide necessary instruction and guidance for successful completion of the course. So the student is not really to be left off on their own, but obviously to be guided largely like kind of an independent study-ish situation to complete the work that you've agreed. You will work with them beyond the deadline. Other consideration is that if a student is up for graduation and reliant on those, say, 3 credits, and the G grade is not completed in time for that graduation to be certified, the student's graduation will be delayed, something that we also find students aren't as aware of. So for example, if you have a student this semester who is up for December graduation, and on December 1st, the student and you agree to give that student a G grade, if that grade is not completed by December 17th and entered, that student will not graduate. They will have to apply for graduation the following year. And those are very firm deadlines as well. So it's also important to know when you give a G grade, what exactly rests on it, what are the stakes for that, and what are the deadlines. After the deadline, we find the registrar just is really firm about no grade change after that point. So say, December 23rd comes around, the student completes the work. If it has lapsed to an NG, we can't do anything with it. Now, the other thing is that the instructor leaves the university or loses access to PeopleSoft and Canvas. Before the student submits the work, the responsibility of completing that G grade and entering it moves up a departmental chain. And so this often occurs with graduate student instructors and PTIs. So in our department, we are often left grading work for classes without understanding exactly what was left to do or what the grades were so far, which is why the contract where all that information is laid out would be super helpful. So now, first of all, do we have any questions or any comments so far before we enter into more of a conversation?
Sorry,
Anybody?
I don't know if I
Yeah.
missed this, but is there a deadline for the completion of the work if assigning a G grade, or is that completely up to the instructor?
It's up to the instructor, but it has to be done within a year as per the university. But you can determine the deadline. It can be shorter than that, and most schools expect it to be shorter than that. So ours is more up to the instructor and department.
Got it. Thanks.
Great question, though, because that's where we get buried, is because of that ambiguity. So is it a G? So let's just take a look at some, or unless anybody, but we don't have to do this. Does anybody have any specific cases that they'd like to discuss about whether this would be appropriate to give a G or what the grading scheme should be? Okay, well then, let's see.
I don't know if I have a specific, but one of the things that we discuss a bunch in our department is what work can be completed later and what is impossible to complete once
Right.
you've completed the course. Like
Mhm.
can you get a G when your final assignment is a group project? Like what happens in that case? Or if participation the whole term has been something and you've missed it for 2/3 of the term, stuff like that.
Right. And I think that's why what becomes particularly murky and difficult to get to the bottom of is what is actually a fair outcome for the student, for the other students in the class, what can be accomplished, what cannot be accomplished, how much of, if class is missed, how much of the work cannot be done if lectures are missed and cannot be reproduced by an instructor trying to help a student along. So I have come up with some cases here. Oh, look, I made that fun. All right. So these are, you know, all just fake cases, but based on things that we've seen. And in this case, this is, I think, one of a common one. A student is attending a class regularly, submitting work, and takes the first exam, becomes ill mid-October, misses 2 weeks of class, and then another exam, had earned an 81 on the first exam. Comes back to class once in November, but stays in touch, reporting ongoing symptoms and stress due to falling behind in all courses. The student canceled several attempts to reschedule the second exam and did not come to class the rest of December, but appears again in December requesting a G grade. So what do you think you would want to know before determining if this was a reasonable request? What are the components?
Maybe some medical documentation.
Okay. To seek medical documentation.
I do have a question about that one. To what degree
yeah.
can we request that kind of information, and when does it become a privacy concern?
You can request that kind of information, and yeah, you can request that kind of information. I do want to say that just as anecdotally, I find that we request that kind of information sometimes, or it comes to us in the assistant dean's role, but often a student will have missed, and this is another layer, will have missed a month, but will have a medical documentation that they should be excused from class for 2 days. So, you know, they produce the medical document. Am I the only one who's seen it? You've all seen it, right? Yep. But, and so then that's another thing. They've produced something, but it doesn't really give them, you know, permission to not attend for a month. We know, but then again, we know students feel sick. We know students get buried. We know students then get stressed, and that adds another component. So, any other thoughts about this case?
I mean, I was thinking with mental health that part of the problem is that people don't seek help. So
right.
When I talk to students about this, I always, you know, as an advisor, encourage them that they have to be like, even if it's after the fact, to show that they are getting help and moving forward with some therapy or psychiatric help. And then their teacher might be more accommodating if they can see that they're going to turn it around.
Right. And, you know, I totally agree with you, Jane, because if we don't, I mean, if we're in a role that we know a student is struggling and we are not part of the process of getting them where they need to be, we're not really doing what we can at that point either. In other words, enabling a lack of attention to issues that are, you know, impeding your health is, and that's one of the harder things to do, for them to understand we're not being punitive. We're just really trying to accelerate the process of their health. All right. So in this case, I mean, I don't know, say 50% of the work is done, say the student is a solid student, and then just falls off the map. I will say the cases I've seen this year, and I don't know if my assistant dean colleagues have seen much of this, but I see more departments would not encourage this to be a G grade. More departments that would say, or faculty that would say, the work simply can't be made up in December. Too much has been missed. Okay, and here are some other ones. And this is something that would not be documented, which is something that we often get that is part of G grade requests. a student comes to class, informs of family challenges, comes sporadically, but insists on being committed to completing the class by mid-November, has done 25% of the work, has stayed in regular contact over email, hasn't dropped off the planet, has been keeping you informed that they're trying and they're doing their best, dealing with a lot, and implores you to give them a chance to complete the class, and financial aid is on the line. So now, how do we advise or guide this student? Do you think?
Well, I'd at least say that financial aid can always be appealed. And so
Mhm.
I don't respond too strongly to my financial aid is on the line. I'll lose my financial aid, because I can just say to them, there's an appeals process. It's very generous. It takes into account the difficulties you're going through, especially if they're affecting multiple classes. And so for me, I wouldn't, I don't register. I mean, I say, like, I hope you get it, but I give them the guidance on how to appeal it, not figure that into my calculations.
So that's really important. That's great advice for everyone to know, that that concern can be directed somewhere else too, that that's not all lost if the student is worried about money. Do you see a difference between a student coming, dropping off, and a student that sporadically appears? You know what I mean? And in your departments, what would be the likelihood of a student whose presence is like that, or engagement is that irregular, of actually succeeding in the course? What do you think, Tom?
I would say, I mean, we teach two very different types of classes in the Slavic department. One of them very task-based and skill-based, foreign language. And therefore, if you even miss a few days, you're going to be significantly behind. And in that case, a G wouldn't help at all, because what would it actually look like? An instructor would have to meet for the same number of contact hours over the summer, but unpaid with the same student, right? That kind of gets into murky territory too. For a literature or content class, it's also technically feasible, I suppose. But at the same time, if papers are scaffolded properly, then the work is being built up and reflected upon and then changed in such a way that having missed 25% of it is solvable, but not having missed 75% of it. This almost, to my eye, seems like a reversal of what a G should be. If it was the opposite, and 75% of the work was done by November 15th, not vice versa, then it could be a G.
Right. Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Do we get into murky territory there? I just wanted to ask, because I've been in that same
Sure.
scenario that you mentioned earlier, and I'm glad we have an answer for it, because I was a visiting instructor at Rutgers. I had a student who had to take an incomplete because that was the start of COVID, and I have no idea what happened, because obviously my access to Canvas and emails and so on were shut off, and so that just became someone else in the department's issue, but they don't have the rest of that student's grades or any other info about it, right? Does that become an issue also for example, like if we have visiting faculty or part-time instructors who still have access to Canvas, say, but who aren't on university payroll in a certain semester or over the summer, for example, and who are expected, if a student has a G in their class, to start to meet with them over that time period? We get kind of into murky territory there.
Into CBA violations. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
absolutely. What are thoughts on that?
It's a thing I've done in the past, but now I would have to think through, right? I've certainly had like independent study weekly level meetings with a student who had a G in my first year here, but technically during a time when I wasn't on payroll, right?
And I mean, it's sort of like this conflicting rights scenario, right? The right of the student to complete the work and the right of the faculty to work when they're supposed to work. So in that case, I can say that I've had in my department so many cases of grad student TAs in the summer that then get jobs or leave, that give G grade students, that we were like desperately trying to, and then a year later, the work would come in. And, inevitably we'd get an email that said, I've been trying to reach this instructor. They're not responding to my emails. Like, that instructor has left the building, right? They're like long gone. And they'll say, but I really need this grade in, and I had a year to do it. And we will desperately be trying to piece together, like literally take screenshots, because we can't even get into their Canvas pages. I mean, I guess the chairs can, but taking screenshots and evaluating, I'm in history, work that we're not specialists in, right? In assignments that we don't understand what the context for what they were designed for. And then we do those grades and enter those grades, because the chair can do that. The chair can always add the grade. But what I've done the last couple of years is I've said to grad students that they can give a G grade, but it has to be, the students have to agree to complete the work in the next 3 weeks before that person starts their job. And the truth is, I really think, and again, totally anecdotal, but I really think if they don't complete it in the next 3 weeks, they're not going to complete it in the next, it's going to be like, then it gets kicked to the year. Like, we don't see many G grades. I don't know. Well, Jane, you've been around, you've been in class long. We don't see many G grades that come in like 6 months later. It's either right after the deadline or at the very end of the year deadline.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's typical. Agree, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something I've changed a lot in my G grades, because when I first started teaching, I gave G grades, you're sympathetic, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw time and time and time again, them not finishing them at all, right? It was just the unbearable thought of failing the course, and it yielded absolutely nothing. And so it's a problem. So I feel like that, to me, is the single biggest advantage of the contract, right? Is you can set a manageable timeline and, expect that they actually finish it.
I think there's a subset of faculty that are out there that give a G as like I don't want you to fail, so here's a G and don't worry
Right.
about it. And I think that's a real disservice to the student. Those should always, if the student has a legitimate reason, they should just be withdrawn from the class, even if it's late. So I think there's some onus on instructors to be able to say to students, like, the best thing for you is withdrawal. W stands for wisdom. Do it now. Here's the process. I mean, I say that so often to students that I get hoarse saying it.
Yeah, that's a very, a really important point. Plus, it's, we're not serving the students. We're not serving the students that we're giving the G grades to that just fall off the map. And we're not serving those other students that are getting grades that they probably are not as happy with when they've completed the work in the course, because we have learned also, and I think we see this in, you meet a variety of students at the dean's office for a variety of reasons, but there definitely is an element that I didn't know that students told me about, that it's kind of a strategy, like an inside strategy to get the G grade, let it turn to an NG and just make it go away, rather than complete the class and get the grade that you don't want and then just take it again. We see, and you can tell, because if you look at enough transcripts, you see just like all kinds of courses with NGs and Ws and whatever. You see that there are a lot of engaging in attempting the start of the course. And then when determining it's not going to go the way you need it to go, you find ways, which is survival. I mean, I get it, but I think I think a more effective G grade policy that would serve the students well and fairly and equitably also, and gives the students that really need those G's for a reason that is, the terminology extenuating circumstancing applies to so much, and so much of it is not documentable, particularly in the era of the mental health crisis. So
I have a question based on a situation in my department. So a faculty member who went on medical leave, and if they awarded students a G grade, but if I take over that, am I allowed to take over that? And if I do I have to honor the original contract, or would I drop my own?
do you know there was an original contract?
I don't know. So I think when this popped up, it turns out that the student was saying they had a G grade, but they actually had an F. But
Oh.
I guess also for
It's easy to mix those two up, yeah.
yeah, so for the future, I guess, if the student actually did have a G grade.
Yeah. I don't know. How binding do you think those contracts are if they're taken over by another faculty member?
I've had that happen in our department with people who've departed, and I've always just been open with the student. Like I can't grade you on things that I can't see and I don't understand. And so, I'm a director of undergraduate studies, and so uh, um, I've reached out to the Canvas team. They've added me to Canvas page. I've been able to construct what I could, and then with syllabus and that, I put together, okay, here's what you could do to show me the same level of work that seems to be remaining. And I've basically had to drop a brand new contract in the saying, like, I am taking over this. In order to get a grade, you'll have to abide by this new contract because I can't honor the prior one because I just don't have the info.
Is this your very first semester, Alina?
Yes, yeah.
How's it going?
Good so far. Yeah.
Good. Good. What about the case of a student who has never been attentive, has never been sort of diligent, not been there, not present, and then at the end of the semester says, I've had this extenuating circumstance, but they actually have, could I get a G grade there?
Like never the whole semester, you mean?
Well, just kind of not. Here's part of the subjectivity of the question to me is, do we give students, have certain students, I don't want to say earned, but do you think some student behaviors or commitment to a class earn them a greater chance of being given the G grade than others?
Back to what I said before about, sort of like the nature of the problem. If it's a mental
Right.
health problem, that it might not be easy or possible for them to be communicative while it's happening. And so I try to be sympathetic to that. At moments, you're kind of like, I don't know why you can't just send an email, even if you're really depressed, but to remember that you're not in that headspace and
Right.
you know what they're going through.
Another one that I wanted to be sure that, that's the group project one. What about something like this? When we have students that have a DRS accommodation that, say, permits extra time and says needs particular, some lenience in terms of class attendance. Have you ever gotten one of those?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've had I have a student that this is her MO over multiple terms, and has very clear DRS accommodations that are very like well written for limited in scope. One additional absence, extra time on exams, and every term starts no showing, continues to no show. Is at the point where she's repeated this so many times that at the start of the term, I know when I'm going to get an email from an instructor about, like, I'm concerned about this student, and I literally send the same thing saying, do your best to work with the student, but like know that this is a pattern. So yeah, I have trouble. I think that giving them a G grade undermines the DRS accommodations for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a student exactly like this semester, and she hasn't asked for a G grade yet. But the work she did was not only incomplete but poorly done. I can't imagine giving her a G grade.
So, Freda, will that student fail, do you think? The course?
I think
or
so.
yeah.
I think so. I don't really know what else to do with them. She should have withdrawn from the course. She's missed a ton of class, did poorly on a quiz, hasn't turned in other work. But I don't understand why she doesn't want to withdraw from the class. I mean, now it's probably too late, but
Mhm.
I mean, I do believe she had some medical issues, but really, I mean, there's no work. I mean, I don't really, there is no other category, right? There's a G, a W, and an F basically on the table. She chose not to do the W. I feel strongly is ineligible for the G, and that only leaves one thing.
Right.
But I'm open to other more sympathetic voices, but it's painful, but it's painful to me also, but she really has given me little to work with, and I do feel it's really unfair to students who have accommodations and abide by them.
Yeah, and I think, we're just kind of wired to be compassionate and kind, which is good, when it's really hard. This is partially why when we have G grade requests from students, through the dean's office, I reach out to all the faculty of that student to see, and then I find that the faculty who are more willing to say they've done no work, but I just would rather not hurt them. But when it's clear that they haven't earned the G grade benchmark in any of their classes, they feel more consistent. I mean, I think part of the problem with G grades, or one of the issues that hampers G grades, is that we're not consistent because we're all on our own figuring it out. It's an instructor-student relationship. It's an instructor-student decision, unless the department has a firm policy that you vet through. I did have one of those departments today that said, I took it to the person that's responsible and they said this won't qualify, which removes the instructor's responsibility from saying no to a student, which I think might be, it protects everybody a bit more too, because there's sort of more objective eyes on situations.
I think I was just going to jump in and say this is where the dean's office can help, because there might be additional factors that we may have, and then we have the perspective of all the classes. So what is actually happening across the board, to assess. Some students, they tend to try to put all of their efforts into 2 classes, and then they, the last 2 we start to see trail, but that doesn't mean they didn't do well in those other two. So
yeah. And I think that's always our limitation, is we see our students as students in our classes, and we just don't have the opportunity to see their full range of experiences that semester, and how it's, going across everything they do. And we just focus on what we've got. Jane, does your department have a G grade policy?
No. I mean, generally, people who've been there a long time just make their own decisions, and people who are newer always come and talk to me or Catherine about it. But I'll say, like, there's a lot of communication across our department. Like, I'm meeting with a student shortly who is, one professor reached out to me and said the student hasn't been coming to class. He's going to fail. And so then I'm able to look and see what else he's taking. So he's taking another class in our department. So then I check with that professor. Yeah, he's not coming to class. And he says he has these family issues. So then I can reach out to him directly to kind of see what's the problem. And we should be talking about G grades, or do you need to withdraw from all your classes? But I think it depends on the department if there's enough resources for someone to be managing this. But
yeah, and I think that's also the point, is that it is management. I mean, to your point, Tom, also it's management and expectations of individual faculty. And it's also, sometimes when I was teaching 6 courses a year, you get the end of the semester and you just close up. And then for me to be then aware of dates that I have to follow up on and see if works come in and pursue them, and then enter another grade at that point, rather than just let it lapse. I understand why they just lapse.
Yeah.
For those
our department's really good at being collaborative on things like this, though, which is really nice.
It's good. Well, I think we've covered we'll just open it up to any other. Alina, do you have anything else that you want to ask us about this? Just from your early experiences here, anything else we can clear up since we're all in a small room? Or
Not that I can think of. Yeah, this is very helpful.
good. Anybody else have anything that we want to add?
I have a perfect solution. If we have a
What?
G grade case, we just send it to Liann.
Yeah, I just feel like and I'll tell you that one of the cases I had this week was a student who has had a terrible medical issue, and there will be, it's documented, it's terrible, but it's also super unlikely that this student will be able to succeed in these courses because they just haven't had the ability to get their feet grounded. And we're working on something to get a medical resignation so that there won't be consequences that will add stress to the student. But it's, the student has been using very strong language about, I need a G grade, it's my right, that kind of thing. Like, I cannot not get this class. I mean, it's desperation, which also kind of leads you to believe that they're not as aware of the that there are, as Adriana was saying, options for them when they're in a bad situation like that. Oh. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Anything else?
This has been great, very helpful.
Well, we're always here to help. So, if anybody needs to ask, I think also G grades are better understood by people who've had a longer experience with them. It looks like there are people on this call who have long experience with them. But I will say in our department, we're really urging the contract, and I think someone, probably me, will have like a date set. I will have a chart of all the G grades as they come due to remind people to get them in, so that the policy, if we're going to do it, actually has teeth, so otherwise it's just not a real policy. So it will take management and commitment, and then literally to train us to think that way against all these other limitations, or other expectations. Great. Well, keep those wait lists rolling, and
Thanks for offering this.
thanks for coming, everyone, and have a great weekend. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Casey. Ridiculous.